Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with Tom King's run on Batman. Previously, our hero showed varying levels of stupidity as Bane came to Gotham, nearly killed the Robins, and savagely beat the inmates at Arkham just to get Psycho Pirate back, because he's very committed to his mental health. Bats, of course, defeats him just by hitting him really hard in the face. And now we carry on this journey, starting with the cross-title crossover with writer Joshua Williamson's The Flash, the Doomsday Clock precursor, The Button. Batman 21's cover is pretty nice, a kind of torn-page split screen of the two heroes holding the mysterious smiley-face totem. The Tim Sale variant has Bats knocked on the ground, almost looking like he's in a crater, while Barry stands nearby, looking rather ticked off. Did he attack Bruce? For the last time, we're getting lunch from Qdoba. I am sick of the macaroni grill! We begin with a hockey game watched by several Arkham residents, including a Jane Doe that's really Saturn Girl. She recalls this as a moment where someone is killed, and much as she'd like to, she can't stop it, spelling doom for the Legion of Superheroes, I guess. Batman watched the same game, and a bunch of towering monitors with close-ups of the Button. Neat establishing visual, but doesn't seem terribly practical. Also, not sure which he's giving more attention, because as a couple players begin fighting, World's Greatest Detective flips this evidence between his fingers. As one does. Even if there's a brawl, Batman finds hockey boring. Why is he watching in the first place, then? As one announcer takes the fracas much lighter than the more concerned co-worker, Bruce drops the Button on his table. Seriously, why is he treating evidence like this? Landing right next to Psycho Pirate's mask. There's a small spark, then a great bolt that knocks him on his cape. He sees a ghostly image of Flashpoint Batman, whom he recognizes as his dad before he fades away. He later says this is because he recognized him by his voice and the way he carried himself, but I don't know, considering this is a very different Thomas Wayne than the one he knew, and it seemed very brief, it'd make more sense to just stick with knowing his voice. He calls Flash about it, but he's gonna be a minute since he's dealing with some samuroids. Pretty sure they have a salve for that at any drugstore, Barry. 2 seconds later, Reverse Flash appears, punching Bats and saying he was previously dead, but was awoken by some power calling to him. Nice touch with the countdown until Barry supposedly gets there. Pony Ears takes several more hits, gets thrown across the cave, and stumbles past the letter Flashpoint Thomas wrote to his son. Thawne proceeds with the standard villainous mocking, ripping up the letter, making Bruce super ticked off. But he uses his wits to impale his foe's foot with a batarang, stuck right through into the ground, to get a few good punches of his own, but of course gets beaten down as the minute runs out. Eobard takes the Button, disappears in a flash of blue light. I really have my reservations about this Quantum Leap reboot.
Do it, Gushy, damn it, or I'll smash your brains off!
Then reappears moments later, his flesh melting away, saying he saw God. Well, yeah, but getting an appointment is such a hassle. After also being too late to stop one of those fighting hockey players from dying, Barry arrives to find one injured friend and an again dead foe. On to Flash number 21, with 3 different variant covers. Dawn's flesh dissolving from a bright light, Bats and Flash in some kind of vortex, and the two of them looking at a pool of blood, but with the Reverse Flash in Barry's reflection. Why does every pool of blood I look into keep doing that? After elderly Johnny Thunder is taken from the roof of an old folks' home, where he calls out to Seiyu the Thunderbolt and blames himself for the loss of the JSA, Alan has taped off the Batcave, going full CSI and analyzing everything, seeing the attack as more about torturing Bats, not killing him. He notices that Dawn's remains are covered in the Speed Force, instead of the negative equivalent he created for himself. With cave surveillance damaged, Bruce is the only witness to the event, recuperating in the mansion and heavily bandaged. They bounce information off each other, and Bruce reveals he saw the alternate version of his dad, meaning this has something to do with the Flashpoint event caused when Barry went back in time to save his mom. Then this is my fault! Yes, it is, and you owe her the biggest apology of all! Bruce disagrees, saying time was being messed with before Flashpoint. Flash leaves and heads to the watchtower, narrating that he didn't mention his old foe's body was also emitting the same radiation as the Button, which didn't return with the corpse. Entering the Hall of Lost and Found, full of stray artifacts they'd collected that also act as fun Easter eggs for readers, He recalls when Wally West returned, mentioning a powerful force waiting to attack, taking away years of their lives and making changes to hurt them. Yes, but Dan DiDio doesn't work with DC Comics anymore, so go back and make things right. He'll use the cosmic treadmill to follow the Button's signature, and of course Batman's tagging along, despite his injuries and this being unlike his previous time travel jaunts. On their journey, with great backgrounds by the way, they see unfamiliar versions of themselves, their history, Flash surmising these aren't alternate worlds, but the stolen years Wally mentioned.
Oh, so that's why I'm seeing Cassandra Cain as a strong young woman, and not a child crying every 5 minutes over whether or not Harper Row approves of her existence. Fascinating.
I don't know how one hits a speed bump on a treadmill, but I guess Alan manages it because they are knocked out of the vortex and crash in a cave. The Bat Cave of Thomas Wayne. Batman number 22's cover looks like Flashpoint Martha and Bruce are playing dead and waiting for Thomas to leave. The alternate is good in a minimalistic way, with both bats differentiated by color. Bat Doc recounts the nightmare of his world, how he helped Flash try to make things right, but instead of disappearing, his world was put on life support, enduring despite Barry's attempts to fix it. Wonder Woman and Aquaman were still at war and millions still died, but they finally agreed on one thing: Wayne needing to be axed. So, yay for compromise? He rigged explosives to take any attackers with him when Flash and his alternate son showed up. He's hesitant to believe they're real, even attacking Barry, who says they don't know why the Flashpoint universe is still around, or if Thawne is even responsible.
This is your son, and Bruce, that is your father.
Even if Flashpoint Thomas was exactly the same as pre-52, up to that mugging that killed his world's Bruce, he's since become a murdering vigilante. He's gone through very different experiences.
That doesn't strike me as the same guy.
He scans the vibrational frequencies, saying they're right, that this isn't an alternate reality or timeline. Then says that Flashpoint was never an alternate world, but an alternate history. Which would mean it's an alternate timeline, wouldn't it? He figures something is keeping this ghost of a world together to haunt them, and will need to rebuild the treadmill. It should only take a minute, and that's when the Amazons and Atlanteans storm in. Thomas is ready with his bang-bang shooty-shoot, since he didn't anticipate the need for any defensive capabilities, but Bruce knocks the gun out of his hand, saying they're leaving together, so the two mask up and make with the punches. Just as the treadmill gets fixed, whatever was holding this world together has decided to let it go, as it begins dissolving. Too little too late, Thanos. Bruce tells Thomas that his letter was the greatest gift he'd ever gotten.
So much better than that lame wakizashi Alfred got me for my 10th birthday.
He mentions having a son, and when Flash mentions the treadmill is powered up on its own somehow, and about to leave with or without them, Bruce asks his alternate father to join them. Instead, the older Bat pushes him onto the machine as Flash restrains him. The Dad Knight says that Bruce was the greatest gift he'd ever gotten, and instructs him to find happiness, stop wearing the cowl for his parents, and instead be a father to his own child.
Don't be Batman. Let Batman die with me.
Kinda late for both of those there, Doc. He's already Batman. Bruce says they can save him just as they disappear, and Thomas holds a pen-like device, saying they already have.
This laser pointer I stole from your utility belt will give me endless entertainment to alleviate my ennui. Wrong kind of laser! Wrong kind of laser!
Actually, he throws it against the rocks and it breaks as the disillusion reaches the cave. Maybe it's supposed to be the detonator for his bombs that he never used. He recalls when Bruce fell into the cave as a child, and Thomas carried him out, something he'd earlier tried getting him to remember. He'd said that while they may sometimes fall, Waynes never stay down. They rise, as Flashpoint Bats is engulfed into a blank void. Way to reference Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy there, Tommy. In the time stream, Barry says they have to keep moving, that there's no place to go back to, making Bruce all the more frustrated why the button that appeared in his cave and led him to his father would have them end up someplace just to see it destroyed. Maybe it was the same entity Wally talked about, that stole time to hurt them, and this was just more of the same motive. Reverse Flash appears, still holding the button, meaning the time stream doubled back to before his death. Barry tries to warn him, but is thoroughly ignored.
You have no idea the things I've seen, Alan. Nobody knows but Jesus.
He claims to know who's behind the power of the button, and is certain they've never faced someone like him before, as we go to Flash number 22, with 2 covers showing off Jay Garrick. One with black and white, save for electric wisps of red and yellow, and another where he's mostly in shadow and seems to have burned up a cover of the original Flash comics. Both look really cool, if for different reasons. Thawne isn't swayed by warnings of his demise, since he's a living paradox and promises that when he gets the power he's after, he'll do worse than kill Barry's mother, like pose as a friend and raise young Alan to be his own acolyte. Meanwhile, a voice is calling to Flash, trying to get him to listen as a blue bolt briefly separates heroes from villain. Bruce hears it too, but Barry dismisses it as siren calls of hypertime, echoes of potential moments that never happened. With the treadmill breaking apart, they need to land somewhere, especially since they're too late to stop Thawne. Leaving the heroes behind, Eobard arrives at where he sensed the powerful entity, regarding them with respect, like not wanting to question their alterations to the timeline. He also boasts how he cannot be erased by anyone, and demands they show themselves. He sees some ethereal wisps and panics, insisting he doesn't want to die as his dissolving begins and the button is taken from him.
Cool, I've been looking for a vintage smiley face. Oh, it's got blood on it. There goes its resale value.
Without the treadmill, and thus rather screwed, Batman insists their only option is to listen to the mystery voice. It tells Barry to say his name, and he does, freeing the voice/narrator/original Flash, Jay Garrick. He gets them back to the proper Batcave, complete with Reverse Flash's remains, and Alan, not recognizing this speedster, asks who he is and why he killed Thawne. Jay says he didn't kill anyone, but is a friend and fellow Flash, needing Barry to remember him as he did Wally.
Hey, don't you owe me $50? Sorry, wrong Barry, gotta go.
Also, looks like the artist was really going for a John Wesley Shipp resemblance for Garrick here. Not surprising, given the CW's Flash TV show and all. Barry recalls how he'd been forgetting some stuff, like people.
Someone did this. Do you know?
Shouldn't it be, do you know who or whom? It sounds weird the way they left it. Moving on, Jay doesn't know how or why everything was taken from him, and Barry has already forgotten his name, so he zaps out of there, and it does not look pleasant. I think an engineer on the Enterprise needs to give that transporter a once-over. Later, visiting the Waynes' graves, Bruce says Barry is the only one he knows who suffered the same loss as him.
That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Right, because it's not like Wayne ever took in, say, a kid acrobat that saw his parents murdered right in front of him or anything. And we all know that dead parents aren't found in any other hero's backstory in DC.
What even is this line?
It's not like the guy that shot Bruce's folks was out for revenge or anything, so that makes this line even more baffling. Yeah, he puts in the addendum of also had a glimpse of the alternative, but it still sounds like such a weird thing to say. Ugh, anyway, they reflect on the case, whether it was all triggered by Thawne's death or if his claims of seeing God hold any merit, with Bruce doubting that everything they'd just gone through was an accident. Sometime later, he's recalling his Flashpoint Pappy's words about not being Batman when the signal lights in the sky, and he hesitates on if he'll answer it or not. The story ends on Dr. Manhattan picking up the coveted button, recalling a conversation where he said everything is preordained, including his own responses, and while everyone is a puppet, he can see the strings. Really took the fun out of that Pinocchio song, if I'm being honest. Then there's this short epilogue where the button is in space for some reason. We zoom in on the blood, which should be dried black, shouldn't it? And zoom out to reveal Superman's crest, which looks like it could use some cleaning. Also, this August Strindberg quote about some poisons blinding you but others opening your eyes. A weird prescription to write out either way, I'm sure. Now, I'm willing to bet this story hits differently for people who just adore Flashpoint Batman, which I'm guessing because I've seen social media comments squeeing over the idea of this Bruce meeting that Thomas, wanting to see him in live action, yada yada yada, but frankly I was never really impressed with him. Sure, I have only read the main Flashpoint story, none of the spin-offs, but even so, I just don't get the appeal. He's not the same Bat, or even the same Thomas Wayne, if you ask me. He's a guy that lost his son and turned killer, which, again, I think that makes the idea of Bruce treating him like the same guy from when he was 10 all the more ludicrous. I also noticed that, knowing how his counterpart died instead of his parents, Bruce never asked what happened to his Flashpoint mom. I guess neither writer knew how to handle the awkward conversation about Martha having green hair and asking people why they're so serious. The overall story was mostly fine, though it doesn't make me more interested in Doomsday Clock. It's an okay yarn with really good art, some good interaction with Flash and Batman. I do like the idea of their shared interest in analyzing evidence, but stuff like Barry being the only one to identify with Bruce's loss, and Wayne trading an alternate version of his dad like the one that's been dead for 20 years, stuff like that just really makes it feel very meh to me. There's just nothing for me, the reader, to believe what they want the characters to believe. It's also just plain bafflingly weird to say Flashpoint was not an alternate timeline, when by all accounts, it was! Maybe it's supposed to be indicative of Manhattan's power, but it feels more like they haven't decided how to make this make sense yet. Like they want to go to great lengths saying that Flashpoint still counts and is their world, or some such drivel, even though it was a failed reboot by so many metrics.
How do you know the other world is any better than this?
Because it has to be.
Even all that said, for a story with two writers, their respective issues didn't feel tonally dissonant from each other, and at least felt cohesive in terms of pacing, even if some details don't really add up. We move on to a couple single-issue stories, the first of which is The Brave and the Mold.
Outrageous!
Issue 23's cover looks like seasonal allergies really do a number on Batsy, and the Tim Sale variant has him joined by Swamp Thing holding an old stick grenade? I can't tell what it is. Anyway, Pointy Ears is inspecting a trail of blood as something pours from his chin.
Ah, good boy, little drooly.
With art by Mitch Gerads, we begin with an old bearded man in a chair, singing a song, before an assailant shoots him with two guns simultaneously. Geez, American Idol's gotten brutal ever since it came back. Despite being only 20-odd pages, there are chapters titled after pieces of dialogue from the story, and a new chapter starts every page or so. Is this significant? Let's read on. After the bodies started smelling up the place, police were called in, so we have Gordon and Batman overlooking the scene. The victim, Lloyd McGinn, kept to himself, mailed some letters, hardly got anything but bills and junk mail, paid his rent, but never seemed to have any company. Swamp Thing emerges from, my best guess is mold growing on a biscuit, and after Gordon recovers from his shock and the claim that dead is not dead, but falling back into life, he tells Batman that the victim was his biological father, who took off when Alec was only 5 years old. He said something about not wanting to raise some tree hugger and then walked out the door. Later at Wayne Manor, Swampy elaborates he took his stepfather's surname, Holland, and had only seen Lloyd once after his transformation, and since then got letters from him, but otherwise no communication. One thing I like about this spread is that Bruce is treating Alec like anyone else, in civilian garb, in his house, like a guest, not that he's, well, a thing. Despite the extra work for Alfred and the surprise on Ace's face, I'm guessing this is Ace because this does not look like the right breed for Damien's dog Titus. He described Lloyd as a careless proton caught by a weed, became sugar, then consumed by his grandmother in a salad. Yeah, I don't really get it either. Maybe he's relating it all to plant reproduction. Then sums up his dad's life before saying he'll decompose and return to the green, the cosmic energy force of plant life. This is to explain why he isn't exactly broken up about his dad's death, looking at it from a perspective detached from basic humanity, and perhaps symbolized by his making and drinking his own tea, seeing life and death the same, as both are about to change. I'm not sure if I should be fascinated or grossed out. Swampy doesn't know why he's here, but wants to, so that's why he's here. Okay. So their investigation starts with how someone managed to break into an 84th floor window. They begin with Kite-Man, who sold one of his kites to a pawn shop. Note Alex singing the same song as his dad. Anyway, the shop owner, who looks like the fusion of Guy Fieri and Gabriel Iglesias, sold it to a weapons supplier called Nat the Gnat, who doesn't talk. Now, instead of scare tactics or threats like you'd think he would, Bats recognizes the white caiman crocodile tooth on his necklace, something he'd obtained since acquiring the kite. The only person known to have multiple teeth of that rarity is a merc known as Headhunter, whose trademark is killing with the first shot and shooting a second time for unknown reasons. In the cave, Batman says that he's been after this guy before, but he's so good at running and hiding, he doesn't think it'll be easy. Then Swamp Thing mentions that some grass told him the perp is at the Gotham Museum of Art. Wow, who knew all you needed to elude the world's greatest detective is to be really, really good at running and hiding? After a car ride where they exchange snarky questions about why one needs a car and the other needs a body, they get to the museum, where Headhunter is admiring a painting and starts monologuing because he knows he's been caught without even turning around. Does this mean Batman is losing his touch? He says that he heard McGinn singing that song in a bar and liked it enough to ask what it was about. The old man would go on to say life and death were the same. He didn't know what that meant, but he'd gotten it from his son, Swamp Thing. And because he'd been fighting superheroes his whole life, and that they had all the answers to give to their loved ones, Headhunter found out where Lloyd lived and put two in his head, even though, again, the old dude didn't know what it meant. I mean, if Headhunter wanted some kind of catharsis to kill someone close to any superhero because he knew he'd never be able to defeat one head-on, that would have been motive enough. Simplistic and short-sighted, but fine. But being so envious that heroes have all the answers, and that the guy he heard this from didn't understand the alleged answer, it just feels puzzling, to put it politely. I don't know, maybe the senselessness was part of the point, and Mohawk Guy's motive isn't meant to be that deep, but moving on. Swampy basically turns the killer into plant food while singing his dad's song, recalling he'd sing it whenever young Alec got scared. Batman feels used, despite him doing little more than calling out to Alec as he was mulching the assassin, not physical attempts to stop him, mind you, and wants to know what happened to all that stuff about change and dead not being dead. Gotta say, while I don't disagree with Bruce, sad Swamp Thing looks pretty devastating. Anyway, Man-Plant says that he never opened the letters his dad sent him, just letting them sink into the swamp, and that Bats doesn't understand. That goes over about as well as you would expect with this guy. Swampy figures the Dark Knight is the reason he's here, and now that he knows, he makes like Autumn and leaves. The comic ends on his body drying up and withering away as Batman calls him a coward, demanding an explanation, and how his parents are falling back into life. Remember what you said, Bruce, dying is a choice that no one can take from them. So the better question is why your parents chose to die from a mugger's gun. The Brave and the Mold is a fine enough one and done, but I don't know if some moments are intentionally cerebral or if they're just left vague enough to be viewed as such. The two heroes work well together, and while some might see Swampy being tipped off by Grass as an easy out, it's still nothing compared to some conveniences given to the non-powered Dark Knight. I liked how Bats treated Holland like he would any of his other allies, and that they shared a moment of humor together. The emotions felt genuine, especially when Bruce feels he's been used to facilitate a revenge murder, and that this guy with a supposed connection to a greater cosmic force succumbed to a basic human impulse. What he meant by Bats being the reason he's here might have meant that Alec could have learned something from Pointy Ears to not give in to deadly vengeance, but that's just my thinking. Still not totally sold on Headhunter's motives, but I guess his reasons don't need to be terribly intricate if this is about Alec Holland indulging in the darker remnants of his humanity. I like Mitch Gerads' art here. It looks like he's added some more inking detail to his facial features, which I do think is an improvement over some of the stuff in the Rooftops 2-parter. Also, the world's brightest star, 2 shots, He Left, Kite-Man, Nat the Nat, Currently Entering, Why Do You Need a Car, and finally, End He Thought. Those were the 8 chapter titles. Why are they significant? No idea. Now to the final story for this episode. Every epilogue is a prelude. Sounds like the rough draft for that song Closing Time was not as catchy as what we got. The main cover has Catwoman cuddling up to her bat bow, while Tim Sale has her modeling some probably stolen jewelry, while Bats gives her a loving headlock? Are they being watched and are just play fighting to keep up appearances? Much of this story is a conversation between Batman and the now recovered Gotham Girl, who is unsure of what to do now that her family is gone, and all that power at her disposal will kill her if she uses it enough. Her brother Hank is the one that wanted to be a superhero. She just followed his lead, and expects Batman to tell her to call it quits and live a non-superhero life. He does kinda, in a more sardonic, non-serious way, saying that Alfred never approved of the vigilantism, but his protestations were ignored so thoroughly it was as if he didn't say anything at all. Claire asks if he likes his life, and he replies it's not about liking.
I'm Batman. Because I'm Batman.
I think Bruce marathoned all those superhero How It Should Have Ended cartoons, and it broke his brain. He doesn't think he can stop being a crime fighter, which he does to try to be happy, but he's not. After thanking him for all he did to cure her of Psycho Pirate's manipulations, Claire feels she can't go on not helping as many people as she can. With that in mind, Bruce will set her up with a trainer so she can learn to fight without powers, and thus they won't kill her. Does this trainer happen to look like Liam?
No, he does not look like Liam Neeson.
She asks why he fails at being happy.
I fail because I'm scared. What I've seen. Gotham. Him.
Is he talking about Hank or the devil character from Powerpuff Girls? His reasoning is that if the stuff he's seen hasn't scared him, he's insane. So he's choosing to be scared? Gotham Girl tells him what he told Hank years ago, that everyone gets scared, but that means getting the chance to be brave enough to fight that fear. It's a nice sentiment, and I can see how that's something Bruce could lose sight of after years of living the life he does. Not sure why this whole thing's taken place in the daytime, but maybe Claire needed the vitamin D. Their chat is intricate with scenes of later that night where Catwoman and Batman run across the rainy city together, which is when the rest of the issue takes place. They stop at a rooftop, unmask, and Bruce confesses he's scared, but that he loves her. He gets on one knee and presents to her the diamond she tried to steal when they for real first met, which he bought because he knew he'd need it one day for this moment, when he proposes to her, with a supersized bat signal shining in the background. Turns out he had Alfred sneak onto the roof of GCPD headquarters just for this proposal. He'll spend a night in lockup, but hey, this is Bruce's moment. Finally, we get confirmation that Claire is recovered, and while this wasn't the most action-packed story, it was a good breather before the next story arc. Batman displays some vulnerability here, in broad daylight no less, which could rub some readers the wrong way, since he's usually very private and standoffish. Under different circumstances I might agree, but I don't know, I think it kind of works for Claire, certainly better than other stories I could mention. This isn't him saying, "I'm saving Gotham Girl" over and over while doing something else. He's actually trying to help her make her own decision without throwing orders. His line about being scared may be less choosing what to feel and more that he feels a little fear with a lot of the extreme situations he's faced, and he's not entirely numb to it. It's a fine enough characterization, but perhaps the way it's conveyed comes off as maybe a little confusing. Perhaps not helped by King's Bendis-style dialogue, with a lot of repetitiveness, ellipses, redundancy, stopping of one sentence and starting a new one in the same bubble, repeating things, and so forth.
It's my job to be repetitive. My job. My job. Repetitiveness is my job.
I'm kinda mixed on the whole Bruce knew from the moment he first met a disguised cat burglar that she was the one he'd marry even though she's in heavy makeup and a mask. It feels like old-fashioned romanticism, which calls into question how he really felt about all the other women he dated in his life. But hey, their disagreement about how they first met, boat or street, may be representative of the whole pick-your-continuity attitude DC would eventually adopt. But at the same time, their differing stories is emblematic of their origins, one raised in luxury, the other in poverty, which is an interesting way to show their perspectives. Next week's episode is probably going to run a little longer than usual, as we'll be looking at an 6 parts and 2 interludes, the War of Jokes and Riddles. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.